All right. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants event. My name is Joe Grabowski, and I'll be your host for today. If this is your first time joining us, Exploring by the Seat of Your Pants is all about bringing science, exploration, adventure, and conservation live into classrooms across North America and beyond. So if you want to check out the events we have coming up, we host 40, 50, even 60 live events a month. You can head to exploringbytheseat.com. You can find all the event listings and how to register to join in on the fun. So today, some of you may or may not know, is World Food Day. So we've had a few events lined up today to talk to scientists who are looking at different issues, whether it's protecting crops in the field, whether it's our food supply, and our event today looking at how we can preserve the important genetic material of the amazing variety of crops that we have around the world. So we are joined today by Dr. Axel Diederichsen. He is the head curator and research scientist for Canada's National Genebank. He's dedicated his career to the conservation and study of plant genetic resources for food and agriculture. So he's worked in seed banks and centers in Germany and Sweden and been part of international organizations and task forces to protect these very important genetic resources. So I am going to bring Dr. Axel in for us. Axel, how are you doing today?
Good morning, good afternoon. I'm doing fine. Thank you very much. I hope you are doing well and all the students also.
Excellent, excellent. So you are coming from the prairies today, I believe, out in Saskatchewan?
That's right. I'm sitting in my office here in Saskatchewan, Western Canada. We had a cold night, -8 degrees this night, and blue skies, typical Saskatchewan fall weather.
All right. Well, that's my home province. I lived in Saskatchewan for about 4 or 5 years before I moved here to Ontario, just outside Toronto. So still have family, and I remember those cold winters. Anytime we go and visit, it can get pretty darn cold out there. All right. Well, Axel, it is so great to have you joining us live today. Perfect day being World Food Day. And, I love the topic today because, we're going to dive into what you do and why it's so important. So I'm going to let you take over for a bit. Go ahead and share your screen. And then we're going to do a little Q&A action with our classrooms.
That's good. Let's start. So as you heard, my name is Axel Diederichsen. I work as Curator and Research Scientist in Saskatoon at the Canadian Genebank for plant genetic resources for food and agriculture. I have prepared some slides, which I'm going to share now. Share. That did not work.
I see the share screen. I think you just have to pop the PowerPoint up, Axel.
Sorry, guys.
Don't worry about it. It's technology. Sometimes it's with you, and sometimes you got to coax it along a little.
You see it now?
We got it. Go nice and full screen. I think we're good to go.
Full screen, yes. Yeah. Is it full screen?
Not yet.
Now.
Beautiful. We're good.
Good. Yeah. Sorry. Yes. Crop plant diversity. Why we care about it and how we preserve it. This is what I wanted to talk to you about. I wanted to start my talk with something you all know. I heard that I'm talking here to grade 6 to grade 8, and I got very nervous because how do I talk about something that is interesting to you, right? So I thought, why not start with this here, with wheat. Wheat is a plant. You maybe have heard it. Well, what does that mean? Wheat is actually the stuff which our wheat bread, the bread that is most popular in North America, is made of. And there are two types of wheat, actually. One is for bread, and you have the image there. And every year, every Canadian consumes about 60 kilograms wheat flour. There's also some water in bread, but then it's not only for bread, it's also for pizza doughs. They are made of wheat. Cookies are made of wheat. So 60 kilograms for every Canadian. That's a good bag. My weight is 80 kilograms, so it's a little bit more. But imagine that is what every Canadian, including babies, everyone in average eats per year. Then you have another type of wheat. It's called durum wheat. And that is also a wheat plant that is used to make pasta. And every Canadian consumes about 4 kilograms of pasta every year. So it's pretty important for our nutrition. The second most consumed in Canada is potato, actually. Potato and wheat is about the same amount per year. So for bread and for pasta, you need wheat. An interesting question is, where did wheat come from? In the top bottom here, you see a map. This area is called the Near East. And this is actually the area of origin of wheat. If you take a closer look here, then you see the countries in the Near East that are included. All the red area is actually the area from where wheat came, where you find the wild plants from which wheat was made by humans about 10,000 years ago. Israel, Lebanon, Syria, and then parts of Turkey, Iran, Iraq. This has the shape of a half moon. So it's called the Fertile Crescent, because wheat and other cereals came from there. And then they spread into Europe, following this route. In Northern Europe, they arrived by around 7,000 years ago, which is 5,000 before our common area there. On the right side, you see this is actually the wheat that we use for bread. The botanic name is Triticum aestivum. And this is the wheat that is used for pasta, Triticum durum. But then you see here the wild species. These wild species occurred all in this area in the Fertile Crescent, and people about 10,000 years ago started to use these and change them into the wheats that we still use today. When did wheat come to Canada? You see, in Europe, it was already 5,000 years ago. Canada had agriculture before Europeans came here. They had corn, beans, and squash. The First Nations people cultivated them, and they are still extremely useful and used in agriculture. Wheat came only in 1605. This is the first documentation of wheat grown in a French settlement, and you have probably heard the name Samuel de Champlain in Port Royal in Nova Scotia. This is where he grew wheat in 1605, the first wheat. But the map shows you where wheat is today in Canada. Who produces wheat? Here is Saskatchewan, where I'm located. There you see, it's most of the Canadian wheat is actually produced here in Western Canada, in Saskatchewan, in Alberta, and in Manitoba. Much less in the other provinces, but quite a big production. If you see 30 million tons per year. That's, if we have about 35 or 38 million Canadian, it's nearly 1 ton, 1,000 kilograms of wheat produced for each Canadian. Most of it exported. The story of wheat, as I said, 1605 started, but there's one very famous wheat that came to Canada. It's called Red 5. Red 5 came actually in 1842 to Canada. It started in a province called Galicia. It's now between Ukraine and Poland, from where some wheat were brought to Gdansk, a city in Poland, went onto a boatload to Glasgow. And in Glasgow, there was a guy who had a friend who had emigrated to Canada. This guy went and picked a few seeds. He went to the boat, it was in sacks, and put some seeds in his hat and then mailed them to his friend in Ontario, in Onotabi. That is a village where Mr. Five, that was a farmer, settled. So he got those wheat. There's a very, you ask your English teacher, you can find on the internet a long poem, Ode to David Five. David Five was a farmer who brought this wheat to Canada. Why has this wheat the name Red Five? Red Five because it's a family name, David Five. He planted it. But what happened? He got the wheat, planted it in fall, and all was killed in winter. He planted a little bit more. He had some left, planted in spring, and only 5 plants survived. What happened then? The oxen, the family oxen, went into the plot and started eating them. So the wife of David Five, Jane Five, chased away the oxen. 3 plants could be saved. And these plants, they grow again and grow again until they had lots of seeds, and this is the origin of Red Five. Started in 1842, and it's still grown today. Here is one in our collection. Here in the middle you see how the heads look, and here you see the grains. They are red in color, therefore the name Red Five. And here is the number in our catalogue and the scientific name Triticum aestivum varietas lutescens. This is Red Five in our collection. What do we preserve at our Genebank here? We preserve old stuff like the Red Five, old cultivars, there's other big wheats. Marquis is a big wheat, very important for Canada. Modern cultivars that plant breeding released today. Then we have also crop wild relatives, that is wild weeds, wild grasses, for example. And then we have some native Canadian germplasm, for example, Saskatchewan berry. Here you see an image how it looks when we plant the wheat in our field and harvest them to have some fresh seeds available. We store the wheats, we have cold storage, they can store for a long time, and then we can distribute them to clients, and we don't need to plant them every year because they store very well under cold conditions, low temperature, and dry. Seeds must be dry if you want to keep them alive. Therefore, Saskatchewan is very good. We have very dry weather during this part of the year, and we can harvest seeds of good quality here in our fields for storage and distribution. But you see, we have not only wheat, we have lots of wheats, more than 10,000. Here you can see it. We have many more barleys. Barley is the stuff beer is made from, but it's also fed to pigs. 40,000, more than 40,000. We have a lot of oat. You know it from your breakfast cereals. They often contain oat. 28,000 samples, all small envelopes with seeds in them. So here you see the building where I'm located. On the top, winter time, how it looks here. And this is more summertime. I'm located actually in this office here where the arrow is. From here I speak to you. This is where our Genebank is located. It's attached to the big building. And here we have the big cold storage vaults. And then we have the people that work with our collection. They have here office and seed cleaning space. Our Genebank started in 1970 in Ottawa, and it moved to Saskatoon in 1998. We just had on the 1st of October our 50th anniversary, and we had a big conference with more than 200 participants, only online this year on October 1st. So why is Canada doing this, having a Genebank like us? It's expensive. We are 13 people working here, everybody with salaries, and costs money, right? The facilities, cold storage. It is for food security. And as you already heard, today is World Food Day, and the group at the Food and Agriculture Organization that looks after that received last week became Nobel laureate. So it's quite important, food security. I told you that the Red Five is an important wheat in Canadian history, and it has been used by plant breeders to make more modern wheats that are very important. There are other wheats that came from other countries. Earliness, very early wheat came from Russia, or disease resistance came from India. They were brought into the country and breeders used them to make the modern wheats we still use today. Rapeseed or canola, maybe you have heard it, started only after World War II. And germplasm was introduced from other countries. Now it's a big crop. It's more important actually than wheat in Saskatchewan today. Lentils. Only after 1970, people started to work on lentils here in Canada, and they used collections from a gene bank like ours to develop them. And then there are other crops that nearly were forgotten. You probably have not heard this. Camelina, it's an oil seed, has very small seeds, but it doesn't need much water. It can grow on poor soils. It's a very interesting crop that recently was redetected and was only preserved in gene banks like ours. All around the world, you find gene banks like ours. Here you see a world map. The small column here, this is ours, PGRC, with about 110,000 accessions. The United States have a big gene bank collection. You see that here. This is more than 300,000 accessions there. A very famous gene bank located in Russia, one of the first gene banks, also more than 300,000. But China has a big collection, India has big collections, and many, many countries around the world collect their material because they know it's important for their plant breeding people for food security. Here, what we do in Canada, Saskatoon, this is where I'm located, we have the seed germplasm, but you have also fruits. Fruits, you cannot preserve the seeds. If you grow an apple seed, each seed will make a different tree. You need to keep the tree and you take cuttings there. We have a special collection in Harrow, Ontario, where they preserve fruit germplasm. And in Fredericton, New Brunswick, we have potato germplasm. In Eastern Canada, potato is a very important crop. But it's not only, as I said, not only wheat and seed germplasm. Fruit germplasm is very important for the whole world, and it's becoming very fashionable in many parts to drink fruit juices. It's a big industry. And here you find even plants wild in Canada that are very important for people around the world. 3 weeks ago, I had a very short vacation and went to a lake 150 kilometers north from Saskatoon, where I'm located. And one afternoon I walked and I found all these 12 different berry species in one afternoon. They are now all mature. It's all different species, and many of them are used, are very, strawberry, for example, is a very important one. You know it there. And raspberry, also very important. Blueberry, very important. And then there are others, they are not as important, and some are maybe even a little bit poisonous, but still very interesting and maybe have medicinal purposes. Why do we do it? We do it for others that use this material. We send seeds around the whole world. Between 2002 and 2018, we have shipped more than 87,000 seed samples to clients all over the world. We ship to 67 countries. There are scientists, plant breeders, or teachers at universities that request material from us. But most of the material, 75%, goes to colleagues here in Canada. So last year we shipped 12,000 small envelopes with seeds to clients all over the world. And it seems we get more requests. If you look over the years here, it's getting more and more. Where do you find our catalog? You can go to the internet, you use this link, and then you land at this page, and then you can search. You can type type in a cultivar name, you can type in barley, you can type in wheat, you can type in red 5, and then you can see whether we have it, and you can make an order to us. And usually we always ship free of charge, but only a small tiny envelope, and it's only for education, for breeding, and for research. It's not for growing your gardens. That we cannot do. There you must buy the seed somewhere else. But for the other 3 purposes, you will get it for free, wherever you are in the world. So the key message is we do this mostly for food security, for plant breeding. We need plant breeding because we have to adapt our plants. Climate change, we need different plants. Changing crop uses, people want different tastes and juices or whatever, different qualities and cereals. Changing in agronomy, 150 years ago, there were no combines. Today, you use a combine, you need different cultivars for that. There's today with COVID-19, maybe we cannot import so much from countries all around the world. Maybe we need to start growing things more in our cities where we are, or the villages around. So we need new cultivars that are adapted to these conditions. Therefore, you need genetic diversity from Genebanks because we preserve diversity that you will not find in agriculture anymore. Crop plant diversity, a cornerstone for building our future. Here you see the group here at Saskatchewan. We are 13 people all together. We have a database manager who keeps all the database. Then we have a research scientist who looks into the diversities. And then we have curators that look after certain crop groups. A big team is required to keep this going. So as I said, it's an investment this country makes to the benefit of the whole world, you can say, to assure our food security. I say thank you to the team I'm working with here at Saskatchewan, and I say also thank you to you for your attention. And now you can ask questions.
Okay, let me bring you back in. I'll tuck the screen share away. There we go. Well, Axel, thank you so much for sharing that with us. As mentioned, World Food Day, so this is the perfect topic to be talking about. And the work you're doing, kind of securing that supply, that material. I just want to check on a term here, Axel. So when you mentioned germplasm, that's really anything that can be used to kind of regrow the plant, whether it's seed or a cutting from the stem or the leaf or even cells, right?
That's right. It can be, sometimes you can cut a branch and put it in a pot, it will root. So you can distribute it. You can send it in the mail, cool temperatures. So that's what you call germplasm, something you can grow a new plant from it. Mostly it is seed, what we use. Here, by the way, I have an example. This is a red 5 growing in our field. And you can see it's pretty tall. If I stand up, it reaches nearly to my breast. And this is a modern wheat. You see, it's so short you can't even see it anymore. It's much, how do I do this? Now you can see, all right? You see the modern one is much shorter than the old one. This is what red 5 came, I showed you in 1842 to Canada and became very widely spread in North America for wheat production. It was very important for settling also the prairies at that time.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating story that this wheat that has become so important was down to 3 plants.
Selected by oxen, the most important plant breeders in Canadian history, a couple of oxen.
Yeah, and now it's spread all across Canada. It's a hugely important crop. It's pretty amazing. That can happen, and we can trace it back to that. I think that's even more incredible. All right, well, let's start meeting some groups. So Ms. Maxwell is joining us. She sent in a couple questions via the chat, but I'm going to pop her in to ask one of them live. She's got 6th graders with her, and they've got a great question about climate change, so I'm going to bring her in here. Hey, Ms. Maxwell.
Hi, how are you?
How are you doing today?
Okay.
All right.
Want to know how long has wheat been around, and are a lot of the wheat dying because of climate change?
Good question. I have this bucket here, and I will show you the oldest one. Here it is. Look at this guy. Can you see it? Maybe not. It's not in focus, right? This is einkorn, 10,000 years old. 10,000 years. That was a start of wheat. It's related to the modern wheat. You can still find it. And we have preserved it. And then we have very strange guys here. For example, look at this one here. Durum wheat, as I said, has very, very big heads. So yes, climate change affects, of course, in particular the wild relatives. They occur in nature, and if climate changes, they cannot escape. They may die out, or they have to adapt that. The difference is these guys here, they are all cultivated wheat. If there's no farmer who plants them, they are dead in 2, 3, 4 years. They are gone. This has all evolved over 10,000 years when people took it with them, for example, to Ukraine, have worked for 300, 400, 500,000, 2,000 years, and then the wheat that made the red 5 had evolved, right? Many of those are not grown anymore. They are lost. They are only in institutions like ours because modern agriculture uses only very few, very high-yielding, specialized cultivars, while all these old varieties, they have disappeared. So it's very important to keep them in institutions like ours.
Yeah, and I think, a real fun activity for classrooms, if they have some time, either later today or next week, would be, we're used to seeing the cultivated, carrots and wheat and other species, would be to look for the wild, look it up online, and see just how different the wild looks and how we've changed it over time, the way we grew it, and made selections for different characteristics.
That's
so definitely an activity would be worth kind of looking back for some of the wild varieties and some of the food that we find, some of the fruits and the vegetables, the wheats. All right. So Miss Way's class, they are joining us in Toronto. So great to have them joining us live today. Grade 5-6 class in Toronto. And they sent me a question here via the chat. So they have a couple questions for you here, Axel. The first one is, they're wondering, in the seed bank, do you have any pumpkin seeds? I'm sure they're thinking about Halloween coming up. And the second one, they're wondering, how many other gene banks are there around the world?
Yes, good questions. And this is the time for pumpkins, right? Yes, we also have pumpkins, and we have quite some of them there. Pumpkins are very interesting because, as I said, there was agriculture in North America before the Europeans came. The Europeans brought with them, for example, wheat, rye, oats, peas, a lot of species that are very, very important today. But there was agriculture before, and also in Canada there was agriculture before. Along the St. Lawrence River, there were villages and there were fields that had corn or maize, that is the same name for the same plant there, beans, garden beans, and squash or pumpkin together. These 3 crops are sometimes called the 3 sisters, and they were grown together. So the squash or pumpkin was a very important food crop for these people there throughout North America, and came from Mexico. And there are many, many different types. In the meantime, they have spread also into the old world, and you find them everywhere there. And many different types, yes.
Make sure I unmute myself there. I think that brings up another really good activity is, when we think of pumpkins or we think of carrots or tomatoes, we think of what the one kind we might see in the grocery store. But, actually there's so many different varieties grown for different reasons. So I can definitely see our classrooms being busy researching a few of these things that we're learning about today. So very cool.
Maybe I should point at one. There's one type of pumpkin. It's called bottle gourd. And that's only used to make bottles of it. You use it to have a container. Look it up on the internet, bottle gourd. And you find images in Africa where it came from. They use it to make hats from it. It's like a helmet. You have it mature, cut it open, and you have a helmet there. So very interesting types of pumpkins around.
All right, we got to look up the bottle gourd afterwards. Very cool. So Mrs. Champagne's group, they are joining us in Ottawa, grade 6 class. I'm going to pop them into the call here. How are we doing today, Ottawa? Awesome. Can you unmute for me, Mrs. Champagne? There you are. Hey, grade 6s.
Hi. Hi.
All right. Do you guys have a question for us?
If crop diversity fails, what will happen to the environment?
Excuse me, I didn't understand. Crop diversity, what was the question?
If crop diversity fails, what will happen to the environment?
Whether it's important for the environment.
Yeah, he's wondering if it fails, the diversity, what's going to happen to the environment?
Oh, if it fails, well, if we don't have it anymore, first of all, for the environment, crop, of course, very important to humans, right? But we are part of a big environment. But if we have a big failure in crops, and that has happened in the past, there were big failures. Maybe you have heard the story of potatoes in Ireland, that the disease came in, and that happened around 1840, and suddenly all potatoes died, and people starved. And then many emigrated to North America because there was nothing to eat for them. The potatoes just disappeared. They became so dependent on a few potato lines, and they were all susceptible to the same disease. That is a danger, and that is a danger we have today. You can, whether this is a threat to environment or not, you can discuss that, but it's definitely a threat for us as human beings. But there are many of the crop wild relatives which you can use in plant breeding that are disappearing because we build cities and roads everywhere, so these plants are disappearing. So it's like you have heard of species loss or extinction of biodiversity. So there we have to watch, because even these wild plants can be important for our food security, but also for the environment, of course, because they are part of the biodiversity that keeps in a balance. And if one piece is missing, the balance will change. But if it gets too narrow, it can tip. It gets vulnerable. And that can happen to farmers' fields or garden crops. That can also happen in natural environments. And that's a disaster.
Okay, great question. So just a little shout out to groups tuning in via YouTube. Don't be shy if you want to submit a question. We can definitely work some questions in from there as well. I do want to give a shout out to Mr. Nichols' class in Waterloo, Ontario. Grade 8s look like they're tuning in. I can see they gave a shout out in the call as well, so very cool. We're going to head to another class now. This time, let's go and visit Mrs. Painter. We've got Mrs. Painter joining us with some grade 8s. Let me see if I can get them into the call here.
Hey there.
Hey, Mrs. Painter, how are you?
Doing well. We have 2 questions.
Go for it.
Okay. The first question is, when was the first gene bank created?
Yes, good. Very interesting question. History is very interesting in this, in our area. But it was actually the first gene bank for plant genetic resources for food and agriculture was created in 1894 in St. Petersburg in Russia. But already in 1897, the United States had started a systematic system for plant introduction and also started to maintain collections at many universities, but it was a centralized system, so you can say they started the gene bank system at the same time. Historically, it goes back to botanical gardens, and the first botanical garden was started in 1504 in Padua in Italy, I think. So it's quite a while.
All right, very cool. Let's get question number 2.
All right, question number 2 is what got you interested in working at a gene bank?
Yeah, this I can tell you. I grew up on a farm in northern Germany, actually, and I thought I know what wheat is. Then I worked for a plant breeder, and I saw a field with this here. And then I thought, Axel, you don't know anything about wheat. Look at all these wheats, what all exists, what all you can find. I only had seen this type of wheat, and I always thought, wheat looks like that. That's it. No, by far not. There's much more developed in many countries around the world, has a long history, and that I found very, very interesting. And then I learned that a lot of this is disappearing. We need to take care of it because it's important for our future. Then I said, Axel, that's the area where you want to work in.
All right, very cool. I really like that story, Axel, because I think that's what all students would do is find something they're passionate about and find a way to make it their career, because then what you're doing doesn't feel like work when it's something that you love, right?
Yes, very important, and in my view, very important advice. Try to find out where your passion is. Go for it.
All right. Mr. Manso's class in Ottawa, Ontario. I'm bringing you guys in, see if we have a question.
Sorry, it's because the sound is going from the other side of the classroom. Does anybody have a question?
We'll give them a second, see if they have a question for us. Don't worry about the feedback. No big deal.
Okay.
If you have a question,
there was a question asking what the disadvantages of crop diversity is, if there is any.
Disadvantages. Well,
that's a tricky one.
A disadvantage, I don't know whether there are really disadvantages, but it is something we better take care of. And sometimes it's a disadvantage if you have to take care of something, because that requires work, that requires attention, that requires thinking, and you could say that's a disadvantage. But if we wouldn't have it, while we might go hungry, and that's probably worse. So I don't really see a disadvantage, I must say, comparing to what would happen if we wouldn't have it.
Yeah, I mean, it comes down to ecosystems, right? The more biodiversity we have, the healthier the ecosystem is, the better it can adapt to changes, natural disasters, disease. So works the same way for crops. We need that variety because we don't know what's going to happen in the future. So it really is a bank in a very important sense, in that we can make those withdrawals when we need them.
Exactly.
Very cool. Well, we definitely have time to work in a couple more questions, Axel. So if any of the educators have another question, feel free to give me a wave at the camera or pop a question in the chat sidebar. In fact, Mrs. Way's class was just wondering, in Toronto, they're wondering about COVID. Is COVID having an impact on your activities, collecting seeds, preparing them?
It has impacted us because we were less people at work, and for a while we couldn't ship seeds. I said last year we shipped, it was close to 25,000 samples out, This year, it maybe will be 3,000. It will be much, much less. In addition, we will need to see what the future will bring. But I told you already that maybe we will need more local production in future, because the long transportation of food may become more difficult, because truck drivers cannot cross borders. There are no people to load them far away or what. So if things are produced closer to the places where we live, we need to adapt to these environments. And Canada has a very special environment. We are in the north. We have short growing seasons. Winter comes early, most places are. But there may not be varieties that are adapted to that. So COVID maybe teaches us, pay attention, be prepared for difficult situations. And for that, you need also plants that can be used and grown.
Okay. A question came in here. Mrs. Painter's class just typed me another question in Axel, and they're wondering, where are you from originally? Where did you grow up?
I grew up on a farm in northern Germany, close to the Baltic Sea. Was a mixed farm. And then I studied agriculture in Germany, and I had a big interest in plant breeding. I worked in agriculture before I went to university to understand the practical side better. I have been living in Norway for 2 years, and I have been living in Switzerland for a year, where I milked cows and made cheese. And then I went to university, studied agriculture, focused on plant breeding, and got into this area of crop plant diversity. And then there was a job opportunity in Canada. They were looking for a curator for the Genebank collection here, for the Canadian collection, and they hired me. So this is how I came here.
All right. Very, very cool. Let's see here. We do have a couple more questions. Axel will squeeze them in. I'm going to bring Miss Champagne's class back in Ottawa. They've got a great question about diversity and climate change. So I'm going to bring them in so they can ask that question live.
Good.
Oh, wait, is it climate change? Oh, Jack. You can take your mask off.
Does crop diversity help with climate change?
Good question. Yes. Crop diversity may help because, for example, if we see that climate gets more warmer here, also in Canada, the summers change. Maybe we need different crops that come from areas where you have warmer climate. But you can usually not just bring the plant from a different place to Canada and grow it, because there are other diseases here. The soils are a little bit different. So then you need diversity to figure out what is really the best fit. And sometimes you may need to make crosses between different types to get even more diversity than you can find if you look around there. So definitely this diversity is very, very useful to adapt to the change of climate that is happening in Canada, but in many countries around the world. I don't hear you.
There we go. Looks like Ms. Maxwell has one more question too. Let's bring her back in for a second.
Yep, I have a student who wants to know, is there any countries that you don't send seeds to or that you won't let them plant your seeds, and why?
No, of course, our work has also a little bit a political aspect. And when you interact with different countries, there's always a little bit a political aspect to it. There's a big international treaty for plant genetic resources for food and agriculture, to which 147 countries around the world are members. And they have agreed that this diversity is very important, and we exchange it, and we continue to exchange, because our food security as human beings on this world depends on it. Canada is a member of this treaty. We participate, and we try to find the rules for exchanging the material internationally. So in short, we have shipped to all countries that have requested. Sometimes there are diplomatic issues which we need to look at, but generally we say food security is important. We cannot look at problems that we need to share. I can give you an example. During the 1930s, there was big food crisis in Canada also. In Saskatchewan, people died from hunger. Some during the 30s, very dry years, and pests came, insect pests came in, diseases came in. The soil was blowing. The Soviet Union, scientists of the Soviet Union, sent at that time material to help Canada, although the countries were in very politically very different systems. So there are examples in history where you say, sorry guys, now we put our quarrels aside, we need to help each other.
All right, that's a great story. Axel, reminds me of the space agencies. A lot of the countries don't really get along, but the space agencies are able to work together, for a common goal for science and humanity. So very cool. Mr. Nichols' class would like to know how many, so they're in Waterloo, they sent this in via YouTube. They're wondering how many countries have you sent seeds to? And they're wondering, do the other seed bank, the other Genebank seed banks, do you guys work closely together?
Good question. Yes, yeah, and that reminds me, I didn't respond to the similar question before. How many Genebanks exist around the world? There are about 170 institutions like ours. Some are small, some are bigger, and they preserve all together about 7.5 million accessions around the world. So many of these institutions, we are in touch with them. And if there's a request from a scientist here, we know we don't have it, maybe we find it in another country there. So there's close contact there. But we have shipped from our collection since 2002 material to 66 countries around the world, you can say, on all continents. Most of the material, as I mentioned, 75% is to Canadian researchers or breeders or educators. 25% goes around the entire world, you can say.
All right. Well, the weekend's coming up, Axel, and I think this is a great question to wrap up on. Miss Way's class in Toronto is wondering about some of the favorite things that you like that is made with wheat. Maybe some favorite foods. What are some of your favorite things made from wheat?
Oh, good question. I like actually a whole grain bread made from wheat, and I usually bake my own bread. So I like that very much. As I told, I come from northern Germany, and there actually we eat rye for bread. And it's a very, very dark bread, very heavy, but I like that very, very much. I must admit, I like it better than wheat. But sometimes it's Sunday, right? And then you want a cake or you want a pizza, and then you need good wheat. I also like durum wheat for making good pizza. I have a good recipe for pizza dough. And no, I also like wheat for special occasions. Wheat is really good for making cake. Of course, I like it also. You need wheat.
Well, Axel, I'm going to come back in here one more time, and I was going to wrap up, but I can't resist these last two questions. They came in. I think you can probably answer them in kind of just a word or two, but which location gets the most seeds, and is there a country that has the most crop diversity?
Very interesting question, the second part. The first part is easy. We have here in Saskatoon, we have the University of Saskatchewan. Many scientists and plant breeders are there. They request a lot of our germplasm. A lot goes to these scientists close to us. And then there are many other Canadian universities or plant breeders that request material. So as I said, mostly within Canada and a lot to our colleagues across the street here, where they work with the material. But the other question, where do you have countries with the most diversity? A very, very interesting question. What is interesting is that a lot of the diversity of our crop plants comes from countries in the southern hemisphere. These are often poor countries where you find the wild relatives, or sometimes you find you still have small farmers that have very interesting material in their fields, and we depend on that. We depend on the work these small farmers in these poor countries do and continue to do. That's very important. Most of the food of the world is still produced by very, very small, very, very poor farmers around the world. We should not forget that. And a lot of diversity is still kept by these farmers. And it's often in poor countries, in more in the southern hemisphere. So that's a very important question and very important aspect not to forget about.
Okay, and I promise we'll be done after this, but there's so many questions, Axel, and they're really good ones. But maybe you might not know this off the top of your head. What is the farthest north seed bank and the farthest south?
Yeah, that is actually, well, the further north active gene bank. That means the plants and material describes, shares material is located in St. Petersburg and Russia. That's at 60 degrees northern latitude. There's nothing north of it. But then you have the global seed vault located in Svalbard. Svalbard is an island archipelago, belongs to Norway. It's only 1,000 kilometers south of the North Pole. And there, many gene banks, including us, have sent small envelopes. We have sent 35,000 envelopes with seeds to Svalbard. It's in a mountain. There's a tunnel built into a mountain. It's cold there, permafrost, 60 meters above sea level. There's a small envelope of seeds. In case our place here burns down, or we have a water damage, or whatever happens, an airplane crashes on our collection, we can go to Norway and say we need these envelopes back to reconstitute our collection. And that's a huge safety backup collection stored there, used from gene banks around the world, and definitely the most north, as far north as you can go, I would say.
All right. Well, Axel, you definitely got classrooms thinking today. Thank you so much for joining us on World Food Day and sharing, this really important issue of food security and what Canada and other places are doing to protect our important crop diversity. A shout out to the classrooms on YouTube, a shout out to our live camera classrooms. It was great to see everybody. Axel, thank you so much for today. It was a lot of fun.
Thank you for your interest, and plant something in your gardens. Everybody can do something here. It was very, I enjoyed it, and yeah, thank you for inviting me.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Axel. Thank you so much, classrooms. Have a great weekend, and we can't wait to see everybody in future lessons. Thanks so much, everyone.
Bye.